My dad told me to my face that my sister's wedding was an investment because of who her husband knew, then offered me a department store gift card as my wedding contribution, so I got married in my mother-in-law's garden without inviting either of my parents. I'll try to keep it short, but there's a lot to explain. I'm Claire, 29F. My sister is Natalie, 34F. Our parents are David, 62M, and Sandra, 60F. We grew up in a mid-sized town called Harlow Creek, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone and reputations matter a lot to people like my parents. Natalie was always the one my parents talked about. She was on the honor roll every year, got into a good university on a partial scholarship, and then landed a job at a marketing firm in the city right after graduation. My parents went to every award ceremony, every presentation night, every work event they were invited to. When she got promoted at 26, my dad framed the congratulations card she got from her boss and put it on the living room shelf. That card is still there. I was not bad at school. I got decent grades, stayed out of trouble, held part-time jobs from the age of 16. I studied accounting at a local college and now work at a mid-sized construction company handling their books. My parents came to my graduation. My mom took one photo, and my dad asked if the parking would be validated on the way out. I'm not writing this to compare myself to Natalie. I'm writing it because of what happened 2 months ago, and I still can't make sense of it. I got engaged to my partner, Andrew, 31M, back in the spring. Andrew works as a civil engineer. We've been together for 4 years, lived together, have a dog named Fig, and we're genuinely good together. When I called my parents to tell them about the engagement, my dad said something like, "That's good news," and my mom asked if we'd set a date yet. That was the whole call. It lasted maybe 6 minutes. I want to contrast that with what happened when Natalie got engaged 5 years ago. My mom cried on the phone. My dad drove 3 hours to take them out to dinner the same weekend. They booked a venue tour the following month. Within 3 months of Natalie's engagement, my parents had committed to funding the entire wedding. The final cost, which I know because my mom told me without any awareness of how it sounded, was just over $90,000. Venue, catering, a live band, a florist who flew in from another city, hotel blocks for out-of-town guests, a rehearsal dinner the night before. All of it paid by my parents. Natalie's husband, George, 38M, comes from a family that owns a small chain of hardware stores across the state. My dad has mentioned George's family business in conversation more times than I can count. He introduced George to 2 of his golf friends within a month of the wedding, and I know at least one of those introductions led to some kind of deal. I don't know the details, but my dad has never been subtle about the fact that he likes having George at family dinners because of who George knows. Now I'm planning a wedding. Andrew and I started looking at venues in late summer. His mom, Patricia, 58F, offered to help us with a portion of costs early on, which was kind of her, and we were grateful. We hadn't even approached my parents yet at that point. A few weeks after our engagement call, I drove over to my parents' house on a Sunday afternoon. I thought we'd sit down and talk about the wedding, maybe look at some pictures of venues I'd saved. My mom made coffee. We sat at the kitchen table. My dad flipped through the venue photos for maybe 2 minutes and said they all looked expensive. Then my mom reached into the kitchen drawer and put a gift card on the table. It was from a department store. She said it was for us, for the wedding, to get started. I picked it up. There was a sticker on the back showing the balance, $1,000. I didn't say anything for a moment. I turned the card over a couple of times. My dad said something about how things were tight and that we should be grateful because not everyone gets help from their parents at all. I asked, as straightforwardly as I could, whether they remembered what they spent on Natalie's wedding. My dad said that was different. He said Natalie's wedding was an investment because of the kind of people they were connecting with, and that George's network had been good for the family. He said it in the same tone someone uses when explaining a bill. My mom added that Andrew was a great guy, but that he didn't come with the same kind of professional connections. I put the gift card back on the table and said I didn't want it. My mom pushed it back toward me and said I was being ridiculous. My dad said I was acting spoiled. I said spending $90,000 on one daughter and $1,000 on another wasn't something I was going to pretend was normal. My dad raised his voice and said I was ungrateful and that they didn't owe me anything. I picked up my bag and left. I drove home. Andrew was in the living room and I sat down next to him and told him what happened word for word. He didn't say much. He just listened. Then he said that whatever I wanted to do about it, he was fine with. That night, I wrote this post and I don't know what I'm looking for. Maybe just to know if I'm actually being unreasonable or if the way I'm reading this is accurate. Because the way I'm reading it is, my parents paid for my sister's wedding based on what they thought they'd get out of it. And when they looked at mine, they did the same math and came up with a different number. Update 1. A lot happened in the 3 weeks since I posted. The day after that Sunday, my mom called. She sounded normal, almost cheerful, and asked if Andrew and I had thought about what we'd buy with the gift card. I told her I'd left the card on the table and that we wouldn't be using it. She paused and then said I was overreacting. I told her that Andrew and I were planning the wedding on our own and that we wouldn't need their input going forward. She started crying. She said I was punishing them for not being wealthy enough, that they'd done their best, that I was making her feel like a bad mother. I didn't argue with any of it. I just said I'd talk to her another time and ended the call. 2 days after that, Natalie called. We've never been particularly close. Not because of any big falling out, but because we've always lived in different cities and had different lives. She called me on a Tuesday evening and started by saying she'd heard from Mom and that things sounded tense. I told her what happened at the kitchen table. She was quiet for a bit and then said I should try to see it from their perspective, that they weren't trying to hurt me, that they just didn't have the same resources they had 5 years ago. I asked her if she knew what they'd spent on her wedding. She said yes. I asked if she thought $1,000 was a reasonable equivalent. She didn't answer that directly. She said that George's family had also contributed to their wedding costs, which I hadn't known, so the $90,000 wasn't even the full picture. I asked her why she was calling me. She said she wanted to help smooth things over. I told her there wasn't anything to smooth over. My parents had made their decision. I'd made mine. After that call, I found out something through Andrew's cousin, who works at the same company as George. Apparently, my dad had called George about 3 weeks before my engagement, asking George to connect him with someone in the commercial property business. George had done it. The introduction happened, and my dad was now in early talks about some kind of investment opportunity. I'm not saying this is why they gave me a gift card instead of a real conversation, but I did the math. The introduction my dad was trying to secure from George happened before I even told my parents I was engaged. He wasn't waiting to see what Andrew could do for him. He already knew Andrew wasn't in that circle. And the gift card came after. I told Andrew about it. He didn't seem shocked. He just said, "Well, now you know where the number came from." I sent my parents a short message saying that Andrew and I had decided they wouldn't be involved in the wedding planning. I said I'd be in touch when I was ready, but that right now I needed some space. My dad replied with a long message about how I was being childish and throwing away a good relationship over money. My mom sent a separate message saying she'd been crying for days. I didn't respond to either. Patricia, Andrew's mom, had already offered to let us use her garden for the ceremony if we wanted a smaller venue. Andrew and I went to visit her the weekend after all this and walked through the garden. It was a big property outside the city with old oak trees and a stone path. We said we'd think about it. We booked it the following week. Update 2. My dad called me on a Thursday morning, which was unusual because he almost never calls me directly. Most communication in our family has always gone through my mom. He skipped any kind of small talk and said I had made my sister cry and that she'd been upset for 2 weeks. I didn't know what he was referring to, so I asked. He said Natalie had told him about our phone call and that I'd said things that were hurtful to her. I thought back over the call. I hadn't said anything cruel to Natalie. I'd just been direct with her. I asked him what specifically I'd said that was hurtful. He couldn't give me a clear answer. He just said I'd made her feel guilty about her own wedding, which apparently she'd now been going back over in her head. Then he said something that I've thought about a lot since. He said that he and my mom had always treated us equally, and that I was rewriting history to make myself feel better. I asked him directly if he remembered what he spent on Natalie's wedding and what he offered me. He said the situations were completely different. I asked him to explain how. He said Natalie and George had more people to accommodate, that the guest list was larger, that the venue required it. I asked him who had decided the guest list. He didn't answer. Then I told him that I wouldn't be in touch for a while. He started to say something about family and about how I'd regret this when I had kids of my own. I said I had to go and I ended the call. About a week later, Natalie sent me a long message. She said she'd been thinking since our phone call and that she wanted to be honest with me. She said she'd always known things were different between us, meaning how our parents treated us, but that she'd never felt like it was her place to say anything. She said she was sorry she hadn't. I read the message a few times. I didn't reply straight away. I sat on it for about 5 days. Then I replied and said I appreciated her saying it. I didn't ask to continue the conversation. I just left it at that. Andrew and I finalized the wedding details that same week. 31 guests, Patricia's garden, a small catering company that Andrew had used for a work event and liked. No band, just a playlist. A photographer Andrew found through a colleague. My parents were not on the guest list. Update 3. The wedding was in October. It was a Saturday. The weather was dry and cold enough that Patricia had set up outdoor heaters between the oak trees. The stone path had small lanterns along the sides. 31 people sat in 2 rows of chairs on the grass. Andrew and I stood in front of Patricia's neighbor, who was a licensed officiant and had agreed to do the ceremony as a favor. It lasted 22 minutes. Afterward, everyone moved inside for dinner. My parents sent a card 2 days before the wedding. Inside was a short note from my mom saying they wished us well and hoped I'd reach out soon. My dad had signed it under her name. I put it on the counter and didn't open it again. A few days after the wedding, my aunt, my dad's younger sister Margaret, 55F, called to congratulate me. She'd been at the wedding. She mentioned that my dad had called her the week before asking if she was really going. She said she'd told him yes. He apparently tried to talk her out of it, saying the wedding was the result of me being dramatic over nothing. She went anyway. 2 weeks after the wedding, my mom called. I didn't pick up. She left a voicemail saying they missed me and asking if we could meet for coffee. I didn't call back. Andrew and I found out in November that I was pregnant. We told Patricia in person. We told Margaret over the phone. I sent my parents a message with the news because it felt like the right thing to do factually, not to open a door. My dad replied within an hour saying he was glad to hear it and that they hoped to be part of the child's life. My mom sent a separate message saying she was going to be a grandmother and that everything that had happened could be put behind them now. I read both messages. I haven't replied.